All right, everyone. Well, welcome back. And we are very luckily joined by a mainstay of the MMA media today, John Morgan. So, look, John, firstly, thank you very much for joining us today. And unusual for you, but you don't have the first question today. So, getting straight into it, John. Um, Look, John, obviously one of the pillars of the modern day MMA community, Jose Aldo, retired recently. Whilst he is certainly a first ballot Hall of Famer and in my personal top 10 pound for pound fighters of all time, can you speak to Jose's influence on the sport from your perspective and whether you have a favorite Jose Aldo moment?
Man, what a legendary career. I mean, thinking about all the moments, all of them together, just off the top talking about that. I think honestly, as I've been recalling his career, the two fights with Chad Mendes in Brazil were both of them. It's kind of hard to rank one of them. The rematch I remember was so phenomenal. The volume and the energy in there was so great. If you remember the first round, they kind of kept striking after the bell, and people were like, "Oh, they went late." The thing was, it was so loud in there, you couldn't hear the bell. I mean, I was sitting right there, and you didn't know that it was over. So, I mean, the energy of that was amazing. And you think about the first one where he had that beautiful knockout of, just breaking the grip, turning, throwing the knee all in one fell swoop, man. I mean, unbelievable. And then just the celebrations and the crowds. I mean, incredible. So those are definitely some of my favorite moments to stand out, which is sad because I love Chad Mendes as well. So it sounds like I'm putting him down. It just shows you how great he was. But yeah, Jose Aldo's influence was incredible. I mean, those leg kicks of his, the signature leg strikes that he had, and kind of the angle and the way that he threw them, and the reckless abandon he threw him with as well. I mean, not that they had never been done before, but I think, it was just kind of a reminder that even in the lighter weight classes, you can end fights in that way. And the other thing that I'll always remember about Jose is just the way he carried himself. I mean, I tweeted it after he retired, but you will not meet another fighter on the UFC roster that is universally respected and loved. I mean, it was so cool on Jose Aldo fight weeks because to a man, to a woman, everybody on the roster, even though they're technically peers, even though they're technically fulfilling the same job, they all wanted to take a picture with Jose Aldo because even to the other fighters on the roster, it's like, that dude is a living legend. So sad to see him go, but to me, it just goes to show you kind of what a classy guy he was and what the sport meant to him. Because look, he's a huge draw. He could continue to take fights and make money and be in command. But after that last loss, I think he knew that the road back to the title was so long that it just didn't seem to make sense to keep going. It's like he was either fighting for a championship or he wasn't fighting and decided to hang it up. So a sad one. I do hope, it's funny because the UFC is going to Brazil, of course, in January. I was talking to my buddy Cole Coffey on the MMA Roadshow. I hope they just acknowledge him in some way and honor him in some way there. And Cole Coffey actually brought up, he's like, I hope that's where they announce that he's going into the Hall of Fame. And I thought, yeah, that would be perfect, right? January in Brazil, announce him in the Hall of Fame. Dude's a legend. Dude's an absolute legend.
100%. John, look, I think we can all agree we're all massive fans of the sport. It's a 365-day-a-year sport. But with that being said, with all the three of us being such big fans, what is the biggest aspect of MMA today that maybe you aren't in favor of and would like to see changed moving forward?
It's funny. I mean, some of the trash talking a little bit goes a little too far for me sometimes. I know, that just makes me sound old or something. I know that's what people like. But to me, and I've always said, to me, race, religion, family, leave that stuff out, man. I mean, everybody loves a good, a good rivalry fight. Everybody loves a good little back and forth. I mean, MMA is fun, but when two dudes hate each other and they're trying to punch each other in the mouth, you know what I mean? Like that's fun. But yeah, race, religion, family, hey, so-and-so talking about so-and-so's wife or leave that stuff out of it for me, man. That stuff's, I'm not a fan of that. Which I realize as I say it out loud kind of makes me just sound like I'm old. But some of that stuff goes a little too far. So the race, religion, family, leave those out. All of it, the rest of it we'll enjoy it.
Yeah, for sure. So look, John, when we look at how MMA media is today compared to the early days of the sport, do you think that the massive growth and popularity of the sport has forced the media to up their game by becoming more professional, more knowledgeable on the sport, and more importantly, having something that maybe makes them stand out from the rest of the media?
Yeah, there's no question about it. I mean, number one, the media is way more educated on the sport now than it was. I mean, you look at when I started covering it, I mean, a lot of the media that was there, especially the general sports media. I mean, obviously, if you had specialists, of course, they knew what they were looking at. But I think even the specialists are more educated now than they used to. I mean, they know the sport even better than they did back then. But now you're even seeing kind of the general media. Like when you go to a town, you know, the guy that covers everything in that town still knows a little bit of something about the sport. And that used to not be the case at all. So it's definitely forced it. As far as doing something to stand out, you're absolutely right. So it's a numbers game now. You know what I mean? There's so many people trying to do this. And that is one piece of advice I always try to give to people that are getting into the game. You know, you'll talk to younger journalists and they're like, hey man, how do I do what you do? And the first thing I always tell them is like, first of all, don't do exactly what I do. You know what I mean? There's too many people already doing that. You know what I mean? Especially if you're trying to do a startup or you're trying to do something on your own and you're trying to go against these, you know, massive multi-million-dollar budgets of some of the major websites and stuff that are out there, it's tough. But if you can find your own niche, you know, either whether it be through, you know, the lens in which you present things or whether it be because you focus on, you know, what I always tell people is when you're first starting out, start local, like start covering the gyms, the organizations, the things in your area, because they're begging for that attention. They're begging for that coverage and you'll be able to cover it better than anybody. And then you start to develop relationships and that sort of thing. So yeah, long-winded answer to your question. Absolutely. I think it's necessitated because, you know, there weren't a lot of people trying to make this a job, you know, 15, 20 years ago. Now there are.
Yeah. John, it's very evident that, you know, you've truly been a part of the fabric of MMA media for the good part of 15, 20 years, you know, coming up to at this point. I mean, I've been watching since Brock Lesnar sort of got in 2008, like that poster behind you. And I remember hearing your voice at the press conferences, and your voice is very synonymous. So being someone who has covered the sport for so long and so many years, what originally brought you into the sport and made you a fan?
So it's interesting. It's if you want the full story, it started out when I was a little kid. I liked pro wrestling. I grew up in the Saturday Night's Main Event era, you know, Hulk Hogan, Macho Man, Andre, all that. And then I was around like 8 or 9 years old. I figured out that it was scripted, you know, that it wasn't actual competition. And I was like heartbroken.
You mean The Undertaker isn't from Death Valley?
Right? Can you believe it? And I was gutted. As a little kid, I thought, man, I thought this stuff was so cool. So I kind of fell off for a little bit. And then when I was around 12, 13 or so, I happened to be through a friend of a friend at a gym opening in Dallas. It was a kickboxing gym, and it was Guy Mesger was opening a kickboxing gym in Dallas. And I was there, and inside of it, he had a tape, VHS tape, playing Muay Thai fights from Thailand. And I was like, as soon as I saw Muay Thai for the first time, I was like, oh, that's what a real fight looks like. Like, that's unbelievable. And so that attracted me. And so I kind of started covering Guy's career, or following it. I was a kid at the time. And then that's, you know, right around the time that the UFC launched and Pancrase launched as well. And I started watching the early UFCs, renting the tapes from Blockbuster. I think the first pay-per-view I ever bought was UFC 7. The first UFC I ever attended was UFC 16. So very, very early adopter of it. And I just loved it. To me, it was the most pure form of competition, right? Like there's no... You can't blame like, well, the wide receiver had a bad day, or, you know, this guy wasn't playing deep. Like, it's you. And it's just the most sincere, earnest, true form of competition. And I love that aspect about it. And then, you know, and early on, you know, when I saw Hoist Gracie put a triangle choke on, I'm like, what the hell is that? Like, you can choke somebody out with your legs? Like, I didn't know you could do that. And so it was just this mind-blowing stuff to me. And I really started loving it. And then, as the sport started to evolve, then you really start to get to know the athletes as well. And you realize, I mean, just how phenomenal the athletes are, man, the sacrifices they make, the dedication they have, like all those things. So when you put those two together, like, I love the action that's happening inside of the cage, and I love the personality and the life lessons and the journeys of these athletes that are participating in it. It's just like, well, there you go. This is my sport, man. This is my sport. And to be honest, though, at that time, I just loved it, but you never knew, at least at that time, those early days, I never saw it getting as big as it is right now. I mean, it's unbelievable right now.
Yeah, the explosion is definitely unbelievable, particularly in the last 5 or so years. But look, so John, over the years, we've seen so much discussion of, well, if fighters band together, they could fight for things like fighter pay, sponsorship, negotiating their contracts. But could you ever see something like that, like a fighters union actually working in a sport that is so individualistic in nature?
It's hard. It's hard, man. I've seen it over the years, because what you're saying is true. And I believe if they could, I mean, some type of collective bargaining would be phenomenal. You know what I mean? For them to have a seat at the table and to voice their concerns. I kind of like that. The quote I saw the other day with Francis Ngannou saying that, like, I think some of the decisions the UFC makes sometimes aren't made with ill intentions. It's just that they don't necessarily think of like how this affects us directly. And so they think maybe they're making the right decision, when in reality, if like, hold on, if you would talk to everybody, which is what collective bargaining would offer. But as far as getting everybody on the same page, it's tough, man. It's really, really tough because everybody's needs are so different. You've got to have, people that are at the very top and the people at the very bottom all be lockstep. And that's difficult to do, especially because, look, man, if 500 people on the UFC roster say we're going on strike, guess what? There's 500 other people out there in the world
waiting in the wings yet to come in.
Yeah, I'll take
Conor McGregor version 2. Yep.
I'll be there. And so that's tough. This will never happen either, but I did think this would be the quickest, maybe not the quickest, but the simplest way to make it happen. Let's imagine it's a UFC pay-per-view, Madison Square Garden, sold out, 2 title fights, it's expected to be 1 million plus pay-per-view buys, whatever. And the 10 guys or girls that are on the main card all decide together, we're not walking out. Yeah. None of the 10 of us are walking out tonight until we get, and you couldn't hammer out an entire collective bargaining agreement, but like a promise of, that we get to have this meeting or at least these basic demands. Because then you'd only need 10. Because 10 people on fight night with pay-per-view sold in a sold-out Madison Square Garden, that might impact some change. But the reality is, I don't even think you could get those 10 people to agree to it. So if you can't even get 10 people to agree to it, how are you going to get 500,
Yeah, 100%. John, this year we've seen some incredibly exciting fights and amazing matchups. And just when you think, this year couldn't get any better than last year, tops it every single year, gets better and better. So as we sort of look to the back end of 2022, we've still got some very exciting fights coming up. We've got Izzy and Pereira. We've got Islam and Mark and Charles next month. Potentially John Jones maybe lurking in the wing somewhere if he comes back. But as we close out the year, what are you most excited for? Which fight are you most excited for?
God, man, you hit the ones, right? Those are the ones that we're all most pumped about right now, right? Because with Izzy and Pereira, I love the fight. And, and I love the fact that the UFC didn't mess around with getting Pereira into that, right? Because it's easy to say, does Pereira really deserve a title fight right now? Like, no, not really.
But there's nothing else. There's nothing else at middleweight.
And the history is just there. It's not like some random dude came in and they rushed him to the top. It's a dude that has beaten Israel Adesanya that has history. If this was just some guy off the streets that was like the next big thing, I'd say, come on, man. You rushed this guy. No, you put together this matchup as quickly as possible because it's the one that needs to happen. So there's history there. And Pereira is nasty, right? He doesn't have this, honor for Israel or what. So I'm super, super pumped for that fight. As great of a fighter as Israel is, and he's certainly the more well-rounded mixed martial artist at this point, I don't necessarily see an Izzy want to hey, let's shoot a takedown and take him down. Yeah. So now you're standing with Pereira, who's nasty. So I love that fight. And of course, as you said, guys, Islam and Charles, the stylistic matchup is unbelievable there. Can't wait for that. Charles, kind of still the uncrowned champ, right? I think everybody feels he's still the title holder, but now, he's got to go to Abu Dhabi and face Islam, who, stylistically might be the toughest matchup. So I love that fight. John Jones and Steve, it's tough for me. It's tough for me to get excited. I love the idea of it, but until it happens, it's tough for me to get excited about it, right? Like
so those long at this point.
That's it, man. And I want to see it. I am glad that John didn't rush to heavyweight. I really do like the fact that he said, look, I'm not just going to be a blown up light heavyweight. I'm going to put some muscle on. I'm going to make sure I'm a true heavyweight. And he's done that, but it's okay, that's done now. Okay. Can we get a fight book? So until we get a fight book, it's tough, but man, can you imagine? Listen, I do believe that John Jones is the greatest pound for pound of all time. I know a lot of people disqualify him because of the drug tests or, because of some of the things that have happened outside. And I get that. And look, and you can make conversations for others. It's a healthy debate, right?
Yeah.
But if he moves up to heavyweight and wins the heavyweight title as well, how do you debate anymore that he's not the greatest of all time? So I love it. I want John Jones to get heavyweight, but until we actually get something booked, I can't let myself get as excited as I am about those other fights.
For sure. So, John, speaking on those big fights, can the emergence of what we could maybe call casual media around big money fights, such as a Conor fight or a Jorge fight, be difficult for you as a fan and as a member of the media to see? Because whilst everyone has their place and, has to start somewhere, it can be really clear to media and fans of MMA when someone is covering an event that they don't really have knowledge of the sport or what these athletes go through every day. Yeah,
it's interesting, and you definitely see that, and there it's it's a two-sided coin, right? On the one hand, it's like, well, this is annoying. This person has no idea what they're covering. They clearly don't know what they're doing, or they ask some question that you're like, come on, man, like that dude's answered that question 100 times or whatever. You know what I mean? So that part is a little bit kind of like, what are you doing here? You're wasting our time. But then you also got to look at the other side of it, man. And that is that, look, man, this is new eyeballs coming to the sport. This is an opportunity for more people to see it. These people have an outlet, a platform, or whatever that isn't necessarily getting coverage on a day-to-day basis. So if this is what it takes to get them in, then let's do it. Let's deal with it. So, while the elitist in us may be like, come on, who are you? What are you doing here? You've never been here before. I think you got to understand too. No, this is a good thing, man. There's new faces here. There's new people here. They're reaching new people, and maybe this is the thing that exposes the sport to a group of individuals that never would have seen it before. So, so it's a good thing. It makes it a little bit chaotic. I mean, the most chaotic is like, Mayweather McGregor was like the most chaotic ever, because now you're talking about like, two different sports worth of audiences, all these.
Don't forget about Nate Diaz, the sumo style wrestler.
Oh yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, stuff like that. It's funny, but you got to remember there's the good that comes along with it as well.
Yeah, 100%. John, I know you and the great CM Punk, Phil Brooks, commentate the CFFC events, which is a great connection to have. I grew up watching wrestling as well, and I watched CM Punk wrestle. So, can you give us a bit of background on how that friendship with CM Punk originated?
Yeah, man, it's really funny. So, Dave Schaller, actually, who used to be the PR head for the UFC, and actually works with the NBA's Philadelphia 76ers now. He's a high-ranking exec there, but he was with CFFC for a while after he left the UFC, and he came to me and was like, "Hey, I'm working with this organization, CFFC. I'm sure you've heard of them." And absolutely, yeah, definitely have. He's like, "I'd love for you to come commentate for us." And I said, "Man, I love it. That's something I'm starting to do more of in my career, and I really, really enjoy it. Not that I still don't love my normal job, but it's kind of a new role." And he's like, "Yeah, and I'd like you to do it with CM Punk." And initially, I'm like, "What? Like CM Punk that like doesn't drink, whereas like I'm at the bar every night after every show?" I'm like, CM Punk, who is a professional wrestling superstar, and I have no idea what's going on in professional wrestling. Like the CM Punk that when he got signed by the UFC, I was like reading his Wikipedia page for like facts I could use to fill out my story because I didn't know anything about him. I was like, "You want us to work together?" I'm like, "How's this supposed to work?" But it did, man. And man, I felt like we clicked like very early on. And he's such a good dude, and he's so passionate about the sport, man. Like CM Punk loves MMA, like still trains, even though he's clearly, never going to fight again. But still loves the sport, and he has such a passion for it that you get to. I mean, you guys get it, right? Like it's the funny thing about this community, right? You're passionate about the same sport, like you don't even know who the other person is, and all of a sudden you have this kinship. You know what I mean? And you're hanging out, you're talking about the same thing, and so that happened, and so yeah, we've become really good friends. I at least I consider him a really good friend, and I got a chance to see him to wrestle. It was really cool. So I haven't seen wrestling in years, right? And it turns out that he was coming to do a show in Vegas, and I was like, "That's awesome!" I didn't even know at the time. I was like, "Hey, man, like, can you hook us up? Like, I want to come see you." Right? He's like, "I got you, man. Like, we'll take care of you." And I didn't even know when I was asking that he was like competing for the title that night. It was like a big pay-per-view and all. I was like, "What?" Okay. Showed up and had a blast. He actually won the title, so I actually got to be there with my wife and my kid in the audience when he won the title for the first time at AEW. And that was so cool, man. Like I hadn't watched wrestling in years, and it was fun to watch a show. And I had fun the whole night. Like AEW, we had a good time the whole night. But like my kid's 10, and he had never seen wrestling, and so like a 10-year-old watching it for the first time, and I'm watching it through his eyes. He's having a blast. But then when Punk was in there, man, I've never been more like vested. I mean, even though it's again scripted entertainment, but I'm like, they better not make my man lose in front of me, man. I want to see my man win tonight. So yeah, he's a really good dude. I know he catches grief sometimes behind the scenes for MMA fans, but I cannot tell you what a quality dude he is, man. He's like I said, good friend, man, and great dude.
Yeah, 100%. Look, John, that was the last one from us. So look, we really, really appreciate your time today, man. It's been a true honor to talk to you. I've been, like I said, with Alex and I both have been watching the sport since the mid 2010s and a bit earlier than that. So to hear your voice for this many years, and always there watching the press conferences, and to get you down, chat to you today, it really is a true honor. So we'd love to have you on again in the future, man.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it. I know I'm a little tough to pin down sometimes. It took a while to make it happen, but,
right,
I'm glad we could do it. Thank you guys for being patient and understanding. I appreciate it. Yeah, we could definitely do it again in the future.
No, absolutely. Awesome. Thanks very much, man.